Kia ora tātou, everybody, welcome, and thank you all very much for being here tonight. I'm Colleen Brown, I chair Disability Connect, and it's our pleasure to welcome you to this meeting. I'll be facilitating tonight. I have a very loud school teacher voice and a bossy nature, so I won't hesitate in bringing you all back to order. It's a pretty serious subject we're here to talk about tonight, and I know it's one that many of you have pondered on, thought about and wept over, because it is about your young people and their future. Before we get started, I want to introduce a few people who are here here tonight, who've enabled this meeting to take place. So Lisa Martin, many of you know Lisa, she's the CEO of Disability Connect. Robin Hoffman, can you raise your hand, Robin? From Disability Connect, the information advisor. Angela Walter, over here, from our social worker. Yes, we have a social worker. They're all our Disability Connect staff, and the three people who are here tonight are also the parents of young adults with disabilities. We have apologies from a number of our board members who can't make it tonight. Sharon King, Anne Martin, Martine Abel and Tim Sutton. It's just a tricky time for some of them. It's end of month work that they have to do. So from the Ministry of Health we have Amanda Bleckmann, who's standing over here, Murray Penman, who's over here, and we also have, is Karen here? No, Karen Smith. No? No, okay. And we also have here Sacha O'Dea, who leads the disability sector system transformation, which sounds really quite difficult, but it's not. It's a really very, very important aspect of change that's going to be happening within the whole country over a period of time. We'll get Sacha to talk to you a little bit later. We have Francis. Is Francis here? Yep, down the back, Francis Tene. Liz Tohu down the front, and Felice, right, from Taikura Trust as well. And we have one or two other Ministry of Health staff who have come tonight as well, so thank you all very much. We have a table out the front here, and a lot of people's cards are there, and they are very happy for you to contact them later on. We're not collecting your names and contact details tonight because we already have those people who have registered through our system. However, if you came along with a mate or friend tonight and you haven't registered, that's fine. We welcome you too, but please make sure that one of our staff members gets your details so that we can follow up. You've kind of taken us, well, not really by surprise, but as you can see, there are a lot of people here tonight. So since our invitation went out, we've been inundated with requests from parents and caregivers from Whangarei, North Shore, Wellington, Dunedin and Oamaru, and possibly other areas, because this is a big issue. This is something that confronts all of us. So we put out our invitation thinking we might get 30 people here, and we've got 80. And so we've just tweaked the way we want to do things tonight. Because we have a large number of people who would love to be here but can't, we are videoing it. Now, if you don't wish to be included in the video, please let Lisa know later on, and we'll just put a black swatch across your eyes if you come across it. No, I don't quite know how we'll do it, but we'll do it. But just remember, the question that you ask may be the exact same question that the parent in Oamaru wants somebody to ask. You know, we're here on a bit of a mission tonight, and all your questions are really, really important. And you may say to us, well, Colleen and Lisa and team, when are you off to Oamaru? Well, we actually don't operate like that. Our contract is for the Auckland region. though Lisa and the team do occasionally go and support other organisations elsewhere. We are a small organisation, so we don't actually have the staff or the financial capacity to do other work. We would love to, but we do pride ourselves on the huge range of services that we do offer, and as I said, many of those are outside on that table. We have a basic grant from the Ministry of Health. Everything else we fundraise for. So if you have any incredibly well-off relatives who would like to support our cause, we're always very willing to accept cheques. So I just want to pay a very special thanks to the Ministry of Health, their team, and to Sacha for their support for tonight's meeting. The Ministry of Health have contributed significant funding towards tonight's forum. They're paying for food and the videotaping, and we're very proud of the well-established working relationship that we have with them. This is not an adversarial thing, this is a partnership thing, and this is the way forward as we see it. So as I said, we've altered the format a little bit. It's obvious we have an issue about looking after our dependents after they leave school, and ultimately after we've gone. If the numbers had been smaller, we would have devoted a little bit more time to formal questions and answers, but we want you to share your concerns with us in the following format so we can get as much information as possible to the people who are in a position to make a difference. And those people are actually here tonight. Sacha's come up from Wellington. This is important. Sacha's team works in co-designing, working with people to get the best possible policy. So the reason she's here tonight is to listen and how do we go forward together. So around the room you will see some questions, and we might try and get some up over here. We'll see how we go. Given the fact that we haven't got much room to move around, you're going to get personal, up close and personal with a lot of people tonight. So we've divided them into different workstations, but they all have the same questions. You're going to get pens and little post-it notes when the time comes, and we're going to ask you to have a look at those questions and to fill them in. You can write a statement, you can put a question, one per post-it. So there may be 70 post-it notes around worries and 70 or 80 around good things, etc. And if you see somebody else's comment that you really like, give them a tick. At the end of about 25 minutes, we will get some feedback on the questions, and then there'll be time for the Ministry of Health, Sacha and Taikura to respond to any outstanding issues that might be raised. So, as I said, I'm Colleen Brown, and I'm a survivor of the system. 37 years now, my husband Barry, who's sitting down here taking notes, and I have battled the system to get what we needed for our son Travis. So I want to ask you, any other survivors in the room tonight? Put your hand up if you're a survivor. Come on, be proud if you're a survivor. Yeah, you might feel as though you're going under a bit, but tonight you are a survivor because you're here. So let's have the hands up. Let's have a look. Yeah, it's a bit more like it, people. We've survived. Yeah, be proud of that. And I want to spend a short time talking about how we made our decision for to leave home. I've got some photos of our son and his mates, and just have a quick flick and pass them around. Just pass them back, have a look, divide them up. Travis is one of 4 now adult children. He is an uncle to 5. He's sandwiched between 2 very articulate bossy sisters, Olivia and Julia, and he has a younger brother who started off shorter than him but now is 6'3", and that's his brother Jordan. When they all started leaving home and coming back, and leaving home and coming back, you've got the picture, but he announced to us that he wanted to do exactly the same. He wanted to go flatting. And of course, when your child says to you, I want to go flatting, we were really concerned how we would make that happen for him safely. Both of us had always been involved in Trav's life, and somehow we couldn't imagine his living in a residential setting. It didn't quite seem the right fit for him. And we wanted a stronger say in who he lived with, who his carers were, and what he did during the day. And so we began our journey into really what was the unknown. We went to Brisbane and had a look at a very exciting model there, Homes West, but it was all people with intellectual disabilities living on their own, and we could never imagine Trav living on his own. And he's part of our family, and if you look at some of the photos there, you'll see we're quite a large family. Our daughter Olivia describes us as more Italian than the Italians. And we started thinking this through. So Travis attended Eastgate Community Trust Day program and had met some other young people who from time to time he'd stayed with at Eastgate's transition house. They seemed to get on, so we asked him, who would you like to flat with? And he said, Richard, Dana and Susan. He didn't miss a beat. I said, oh, mixed flatting. Hadn't thought about that, Trav. Mixed flatting. So we got together with the other families who had asked their young person the same question. So essentially they selected each other. We weren't friends with the other families, which in hindsight was probably a good thing. We sat down. We all thought about these four young people and what they wanted out of life. They were at the centre of our decision-making back then, and they are today. Those four families we meet virtually every week to talk about our kids and to operate the flat. We sorted out some principles we could all live by and operate a family governance model. So 6 years later, they're still there in their flat together. And there's the books out there called Four Go Flatting. A little bit dated, things have moved on, thank goodness, but essentially that's their lives. Was it hard? Yes, it was. It was like stepping out into space and hoping like the Dickens that someone's going to catch you if you fall. Did we make mistakes? Absolutely. Were we scared? Absolutely. Did you know what you were doing? Not really, but we just knew that we had to do it. Would we do it again? Yes, in a heartbeat. Was it easy to let our boy go? No. Especially not when he whipped through the house, scouring out his belongings and carting them out gleefully with a huge smile on his face. I'm out of here, I'm out of here. Not one thing left, and a few of our CDs and DVDs went too, didn't they, Barry? Do we have any regrets? No. It was a hard decision. Put a smile on your face every day, Colleen. But it was a hard decision. At the heart of it, Travis is leading the life he wants to live. And I think that's the essential thing. It's critical in all of our thinking. 6 years down the track, is he happy? Yep. Do we have good staff? Absolutely. One has been there since the very start and others for 3 or 4 years. So let's come back to the topic today because we really want to hear from you. You have questions, hopes and fears. We know that. In order for sound policy to be made in Wellington, making it easier for you to help your young person live the life they want and you want, the Ministry of Health needs to understand what your concerns and wishes are. So, this is going to be a bit tricky. But we want you just to gather around these stations. Robin, do we have pens at every station? We will in a minute. Pens and stickers. And we want you to read through the questions. They're very broad questions, but we want you to write up the information that you think is really important for you and your family. What we're going to do with it, Lisa and the team, we're going to write it all up, get it back to the ministry, but Sacha will talk about next steps after this. So we're going to give you about 25 minutes. We want everybody, if you're a husband and wife team, it might be quite fun to separate out, go somewhere different, find new people. It is an opportunity for you to meet other people as well, other parents, we know that. So we've got 5 stations so far. We've got one here, over here, 2, sorry, we've got 4, 2, 3, 4. We can whack another one up over there if you can manage to scoop some in there. Okay, so can you do that now, and we'll get the sticky notes out to you. Thanks. Oh, please just make sure you get those stickers up there. Thing that you think. The one thing we've had coming through, it's all very well now, but what happens when I die? You know, just put those up there. Getting themselves sorted. For those of you who came in late, we've got people from Taikura Trust here. Can the Taikura Trust people put their hands up? Taikura Trust, we've got, you're on your own, Liz. We've got people from the Ministry of Health, we've got Sacha O'Dea from Wellington, and people from Disability Connect. So before we start the next bit, I'm going to ask Sue Robertson to read out a letter, and I will bring this down to you, Sue. We had a parent from Oamaru desperately wanting to come to this meeting tonight. We couldn't obviously afford to pay for her to fly up, so she sent Sue this letter. So it's very important, I think, that we share that. Here you go, Sue. So just as you're taking your seats.
Thank you. This will just take a couple of minutes. So this is from Lisa in Oamaru, and she gets straight to the point. So, what happens when I die? I'm dead. So if nothing changes, I guess that's the government's problem to solve. Me, I'm finally free. My name is Lisa McElvoy, and one of my 5 children has an intellectual disability. This gives me 29 years exposure to the effects of New Zealand's disability policies. I've participated in workshops like this for years, eagerly expanding my thoughts on the best way forward. As an early adopter, I'm keen to think deeply and explore new ways of working towards international best practice. I could talk about the barriers to future planning, but I know that parents are passionate people, and we could all identify those things in a heartbeat: poverty, housing, budgets, safety, bureaucracy, etc. They're individually big stories and collectively hold an incredible amount of love, sacrifice and despair, which I'm sure you'll share here tonight. I'm interested in discovering what lies hidden beneath those barriers and what creates them. I think that a lot of the suffering we face is unnecessary. It's invented by a system that does not trust the families it serves. I'm led to consider, what does trust look like when it's present in the disability sector? Social role valorisation is our driver towards authentic inclusion and citizenship. We don't live in any pockets of privileged areas where pilots are being run. Rick uses the basic individualised funding mechanism to support him to create a better life, and life is definitely flourishing for him since he moved to this model. My life, however, remains compromised, not because of Rick's high needs, but because of my interactions with a system that exploits me and my sense of duty. People with disabilities and their families need to be valued enough to live their life, not fight for it. So when we consider the barriers to future planning for people with high needs who require intergenerational support, We have to understand the impact on siblings and friends who have observed the systematic devaluing of devoted parents over a lifetime. In our own family, Rick's siblings have expressed an unwillingness to step into our shoes. I'm now placing the delicate strands of hope that I have left in a transformation that releases unnecessary suffering out of the system and bonds with families through equity, transparency, and mutual benefit. Every family needs to be trusted to create the good things in life to the degree that the next generation will want to be involved. Amen, Lisa.
I think she's made a pretty perfect summary, really, and I think that's how many of us feel. So what we thought we would do is, because we were going to get you to sort this out, but actually it's just a bit too cosy. So I'm here, Amanda Bleckmann's over there, and I'll pass the baton to her. I've got Angela here, over there, yep, Lisa there, and Robin down the back. Okay, so what did you say? I'll just do a very brief one. I'm just going to look for the ones with some ticks. A lot of people talked about who protects our vulnerable children. A lot of people talked about who will speak for her when I can't. Who oversees financial issues when we parents die. Scared about everything. Lots of ticks. Safety and sexual behaviour are concerned. Lots of ticks. Who cares for him when he's sick? Who monitors the carers? And I've seen that one on a number of these. Who monitors the caregivers again? So there's lots of ticks on there. They need someone to keep things in order in the household. They still need someone to help. How do we find a good carer? Compatible housemates, appropriate housing, loving carers who can make a long-term commitment, reliable management. How can they afford Auckland rents on a work and income benefit? Auckland rents, the government needs to buy houses for our children to rent. And somebody said here, I need somebody to help me through this system. I can't quite see that. And here, a society is judged on how it treats its most vulnerable. Government needs to redirect funding to our children, and 4 ticks alongside. And the last one I'll read out here is, our lives have been constant battles. Please help to minimise our stress as our children age. Safe housing. There's lots more. I'm going to pass it over to Amanda and Murray to pull up some things.
So very similar themes, lots of ones on safety. So safety from abuse, mental, physical and emotional. Staff quality and safety, and quite a few on housing quality and safe location. Lots and lots on being scared, not knowing what I don't know, worries of safety, worry and safety, personal safety. Lots on housing, lack of decent housing, and quite a few on, again, don't know what I don't know. Where are some more ticks? Staff turnover and communication.
Finding appropriate carers.
Yeah, lots on that, actually. And again, consistent care and transparent care, and I think something on transport I saw. And again, a gap in funding, or what happens when children leave school. Again, housing. I think that's another tick. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Follow the instructions. Investigating options, sorry.
So, have we investigated options? Some people say never, as I think it's impossible. Been to seminars on independent living. Do you want me to go through the bottom bit? Auckland property prices again. How will she manage her finances when we're gone? Some talk about what if you've got no outside family support, who does this? And there's a few by families who will who clearly deal with people on the autism spectrum who don't always want to live with big groups of other people. That's too stressful for them. And, you know, they're saying that these are the people living on the street. And I see that in my work. They live in boarding houses. It's not a good look. How do parents remain in control but removed enough to have their own lives? And people are talking about the costs being really difficult.
Thank you. Okay, so in this corner of the room, sorry if I've got my back to you. Yep. Okay, sure. If they go flatting, who's going to look after the flat? Lots of thoughts but no action. If a few sharing, who's in charge of collecting and paying the rent? Who will advocate for my child and take his concerns seriously when I'm no longer here? Can he get along with others? Will there be assistance with any letters or updates regarding the mobility cards and benefits? Also doctor's appointments and eye checks. Independence, having a good life. Will they learn to cope in a group? Who will deal with the requirements of work and income, work bridge, Auckland Transport, care workers? Where is the best place to begin investigating options?
Investigating, people have said nothing suitable and need more options, and they haven't investigated. Worries are, my husband and I are getting old, and my daughter is our child. How can we set up a system that can continue without us? 24-hour care, safety and housing.
Okay, I think, Robin, hold on to it for a minute. I think that pretty much resonates with all of us. There will be one or two other things. There was one over here about rural. Who's the lady that I spoke to about rural? Yes. Being a rural parent who lives in a rural location, where do you get your carers from? Where are the other people that your child, your adult person may want to live with? Where's that connection coming from? Who's going to help you facilitate that? It's a very real concern from people. We mustn't forget the places north who are rural, and also we've got people like in Clevedon, Kauri, Waiuku, places like that. So that's another real concern. Robert, can we just go through, do you use individualised funding and some of the issues in that?
Okay, the two here have said yes, they use individualised funding, but 7 hours is not enough and they need more, and the insufficient funding can't cover carer support.
Okay, so individualised funding, yes, much more flexible than using carers from agencies. Wish we'd switched over earlier. Concerned around safety, or if my child is in a mixed flatting with mates. Yes, when can I get carers? Not much. And in terms of the comments, shall I go on to the comments? Yes, but we don't always know if we're allowed to, what we're allowed to use it on. IEF staff not very helpful about this when asked. Can't get carers in rural areas, which we just spoke to that issue. Finding carers that are reliable, have a passion to be with our adults. Give us the money, light footprint from government, flexible policy, government agencies working together. Policy, work with families, flexible policy. Help and assistance from coach is variable depending on who you get. High staff turnover, very frustrating, explaining concerns repeatedly. Yeah.
No, it's another layer of stress to my life. I know I don't want to limit my options, and I think that's something that's coming through here is we don't have enhanced individualised funding here yet, and so it's quite restrictive about what families can use it. It's time consuming, it's difficult when both parents work, you know, you're an employer, you've got all the complicated stuff around that. It is good for choice and control. Finding workers is hard. Why is Taikura the only NASC agency for our people? Overseeing financial management is a lot on top of work commitments and caring for the child. Again, geographic location means that people aren't even sure what's available. Seems like West Auckland's a little bit lacking in knowledge out that way. Obviously, agencies aren't being supportive. The IF hosts don't know much, and some people are asking how it actually works.
So people who use individualised funding, there's a whole lot of people who said they don't. It's too much, it's too difficult, too much paperwork. It seems too complicated. They found it difficult to find carers, or they think it could be very difficult to find carers. Again, comments about EIF, we want EIF, it's not flexible enough, IF. One person said yes. Comments, what level of disability is required for individualised funding? That was a question. A number of people hadn't heard about individualised funding at all. Comments. It's comments about carers or training for support workers. Who's accountable? That parents have been doing it anyway. What else is there? Little knowledge about how to go to providing for young people to transition to the adult world. Does anyone check residential homes for safety and audits? And that's pretty much it. There's a question here, why they're not making caregiving a more systematic, attractive, qualified career move?
A lot of the caregivers have just had a healthy pay rise, so maybe that is going to be made more attractive. Oops, sorry. Okay, so over here, again, the narrow use of IF. Is this funding relatable to Auckland cost of living? A question about doctors' fees. There was a number of issues about actually we don't have enough money for our young people to live independently. It has to be topped up by parents. So I think that is there's a discrepancy between. And I know for Barry and I, we do top up things. And so what happens if you're not in the position to do that? Is this just for middle class people? We've got how much is individualised funding, hesitating, fear to get carers and what to do if I don't. The paperwork is supposed to be a lot. And then, other parents talking to other parents and saying, gosh, it's going to, take you a long time. Lots of paperwork, and this must be about an individual IF host saying new payroll system is only available on PC, laptop, not on tablets. It's an interesting one. And we need more advice and help on how to use this funding. My son has been living independently for 5 years now and loves his self-determined lifestyle. But what happens? How is this supported when we die? So we're using individualised funding now. Something happens to us. What happens to this whole system that we've created? Why do parents need to pay for GP visits, whereas basic human rights? Why are household management hours so limited? And that's about, why are the supports so limited? This adds to my stress. A lot of issues around stress. IF, we formed a management group to manage a small group of family members covering legal, social, health and wellbeing matters as well as staff. Recruitment, where do we find the money to pay them adequately? IF would not be sufficient. How can we legally protect all the assets my son will have when we die? They're part of the family. Public trust and guardian trust not an option. Which lawyer can be trusted not to get trusted. I see an opportunity to make a lot of money from my son. Well, that's a real fear. Need extra funding for transition phase, $150 per respite care night. This won't be enough to cover 6 p.m. to 8 a.m. We'll need to pay $70 out of our pocket every night. For many families, IF is too complex, time-consuming and not feasible. Is this culturally thought through? And the gaps in the knowledge, where does the funding come from? Where does funding come from? How do you start the process? The knowledge of what is available, who will give all the options available and what are our options. So some recurring themes coming through here about gaps in knowledge, about your IF hosts and what they, how they run their systems, about the fact that parents are having to top up the funds for their young person who is disabled, the lack of opportunities probably too for those people to get little part-time work jobs where they can in fact be employed to top it up themselves. It's just not out there. So there's a whole host of recurring themes. Is there anything that we haven't picked up on that somebody would like to? Yes.
If the child has violent behavior, how they will be able to manage, and if she is vulnerable, running away from the house and those sort of safety issues. And one important thing is my daughter only speaks Hindi, understands Hindi, and eats only Indian food. So how her personal cultural needs will be achieved if she is put into that situation.
I'm really glad you raised that question. I've been waiting for someone to do that all night because Auckland is a culturally diverse city and we love it. And we have to get the appropriate places for our young people that are culturally appropriate for them. And that is absolutely so important. So thank you very much for raising it tonight. Where do we find something with other families? Or do we go on our own, but something else separate has to be made for that person? Tonight I talked about our situation. It is not necessarily a forever place for our son. We hope it will be. But, just like others in our families, they may opt in and out of different living arrangements as they age. Our kids went flatting, then they came home again, back to the parents. Took off overseas, came back, got a house, shifted house. We may not stay. Some of us may end up in retirement villages ourselves. Some of us may be in retirement villages. That may be, we shift and change. And so I think also we shouldn't be put in a situation where we're locked in. We think this is a forever place. It may be different things that we try. And I think there's some really important discussion points that you've raised. So, yes. This is the amazing Jeanette Third, whom we interviewed, and she was with LifeWise at that stage, and we loved her, but she's moved. Wait.
Just another point to consider is a few of the clients that we support who are disabled and manage to live in their own home now, they're really worried what the future brings for them. They are, they're aging and probably aging quicker than, well, not quicker than me, but the rest of the population, and they're really worried what the next step is for them.
Quite a lot of what has been talked about seems to relate to people with maybe intellectual disabilities who have a certain level of mobility, understanding, able to verbalise, and you've got quite a different situation when you're talking about physical needs, people who need total assistance for feeding, dressing, eating, the works, moving in a wheelchair, not even in a electric wheelchair, in a manual chair. Those sorts of needs open up a whole new set of questions. So I'd like to consider those as well.
before we go into lots of other questions, I really want to hand it over. Sacha, do you want to hand it over? I want to hand it over to Sacha. She might be able to answer some of the questions. And then we're going to have time for questions at the end. And Amanda is there as well. Yeah. So this is Sacha.
I don't know that I am going to be able to answer all the questions now, but what is really important is to hear the things that are important to you in terms of system transformation. So if I just explain, because I'm not sure that everybody, it's a buzzword, system transformation, what do we actually mean by that? So when we're talking about it, what we've been working on is what does the ideal or improved disability support system that brings all specialist disability funding from across government into one place, that provides disabled people and families with more choice and control, and shifts the control from the system back to disabled people and families. So that's what we're talking about in terms of what we're trying to develop. The process we've gone through is that we've been working with a co-design group that had 5 disabled people, 2 family members, 2 providers, 1 person from a NASC, and 3 officials, 2 from the Ministry of Health and 1 from the Ministry of Social Development. And that's the first phase. The first thing we did was to try and understand, and this is something that was just in the last part of the conversation, was to try and understand the diversity of the disability community. So this is not just the disabled people, but the disabled people and their families, and what does that look like across. In co-design processes, we were working with people who do co-design all of the time, and they said when they look at diversity factors, they usually come up with between 7 and 10. Our first cut for the disability sector was 29, and that was before we started looking into the diversity around Te Ao Māori, particularly for Māori disabled and whānau, before we got into Pacifica in depth as well. And so some of the points that people made and talked about, you are here in this room partly because you are family members. We've also got to remember the people who don't actually have family members in their lives. So we've got everybody from the people who can't talk for themselves at all, so people close to them understand what they're saying and their will and preference, but nobody else may be able to. We've got people who are from 0 up to ageing in terms of disability. We've got people in very, very different circumstances and a whole range of different things. People who are physically unable to do things but are very capable of making their own decisions and making things happen, to people who are physically very able but are unable to make decisions or access or analyse information without significant support. So there are a whole range of things that we need to take into account. So in terms of the design, one of the things I've been very conscious about is this isn't a one-size-fits-all for any disabled person or any family. Also, what does family mean for a start? So whānau can mean, for some people, it is me and one other person. For other people, it might be 32 people around the table. It can be a whole hapu. So it does mean different things for different people. So we need a system that can actually recognise that. One of the things that has come through very strongly to me from families before is about and this comes back to individualised funding. At this stage, it is just too hard in terms of the administration, and at the moment, we're not actually recognised or reimbursed for any of the effort around that. So that is something that I have heard a lot around from people. So where we're at in the design process is we've got a very high-level design. We are going to cabinet with that next week, and we will be coming out in a few weeks out to the community. But the next stage is probably even more important, which is when we get down to testing it with people and to really get into what do detailed things need to look like to support it. And it comes back to, and I go back to that one size doesn't fit all. There needs to be choices and options at every stage, and we need to think about that. The other concern that I know people have is actually we like what we've got right now. We don't want things to change, and so we also need to make sure that for people where support is currently working in a way that works for you, that there isn't disruption. So that's the other thing we have to take into account. So we're at the point we've got a high-level design, but there is a lot more detail, and in particular there are some groups, and I will be a bit specific here because we know that we haven't done enough work on high and complex, so there is more particular testing around that. We know that we didn't have anybody in the co-design group who was autistic or who had a family member with autism. So there are some groups where we know we may not have got everything yet, but we definitely need to work through, and we want to give more people an opportunity to be involved in the next stage. So we're also thinking about what are the best ways to do that. Some people like coming to things like this and being able to do it face to face. Some people can't do that either there, and that rural comment is another one that has come through very strongly in the co-design and was actually discussed with ministers about the issues around support and access in rural communities. So how can we actually make it possible? So any ideas you have for what would actually be the best way to engage with you going forward, we really want to hear that too. At the moment we are thinking we've been doing regular communication through the co-design process. We want to carry that on, but we actually want it to be more two-way, and we're thinking about social media options, forum options to support people to be able to engage. So any feedback you've got on that would be most welcome. Yeah, no, it wasn't done on purpose, genuinely. So there was, in that, when we went through, we tried to cover as many, so we started off going out for 8 people, and we ended up going up to 9, which was really the most. We did try to cover off as much as possible. We also had conversations with a group of people from the autistic community because we were worried that we hadn't covered that off up front, and we do know that we need to do more testing in the next phase.
Will they be part of the group in the design?
Absolutely. So we're planning to do some particular testing with high and complex and with people with autism going forward. Yeah, absolutely. And other groups who think, so that's the other bit, is it's also, we do want to make sure that other people have had a say as well. That's just 2 groups I'm aware of. I'm sure there will be other groups who think that we haven't adequately taken their stuff into account at this point.
Where do you find the people, or who do you get the feedback from?
So we set up the co-design group, we went out and asked for applications. We got more than 70 applications. So we went through networks, disability networks, there was, the Minister put out a press release, there were different, and we went out and asked for people to apply.
We can get information. How about we get the information?
There's several ways you can get information. One of them is sometimes on our website, but I think what we will do is we will contact you so you know, all of you, where you can touch base to find out information, Office of Disability Issues, some of the social networking, Facebooks, our e-bulletin goes out and so on. So it's really important that you're quite well connected. What we have found is that, and why I sort of started this whole conversation saying 25 plus, is what we've found is for a number of parents, after the young person leaves school, they lose contact sometimes with a lot of the support, all those support networks you got back from school and your information you would get from school, you're left with nothing. And so sometimes after the young person's left school, you keep in contact for a wee while, and maybe they've done a tertiary study. But after 25, we've found there's a lot of parents out there who kind of fall off the radar. And some of them are not connected with work and income, they're not connected with Taikura, they're not connected anywhere. And so data is really important. If you're not connected or you're not being counted, it is very, very hard to determine budgets and where the money should be going and so on and so forth. So I just want Sacha to finish what she's got, and then we'll have a question time.
I think that probably is it from me. Genuinely, there is a commitment to engage further going forward, and I think I can't emphasise enough that I think the big thing is choices and options for everybody at every stage of the process.
Okay, so that leads on to the question of like last we said initially that there is going to be a presentation on that is going to CASA or going to the government level. What's actually going there?
What's going to the government level that you said you're going to?
The high level design for the new disability.
Can you elaborate? What does high design mean, please?
Yeah, sure. So what we did is we went. Let's do it too. Actually, I do, but it's a lapel one. But I can't set it up because okay.
So what we went through was to actually look and say, firstly, what is the experience that we would like disabled people and family members to have through of the new system? So we went through with what would it look like from the ideal experience for disabled people, and what would it look like for families in that? What would that require in terms of shifts in the system? What would need to look different? And what would we need to put into the system to make it look different? And to deliver on that experience to people. And so what is going to Cabinet is a paper that outlines, that first shows a picture of what the experience would look like with what disabled people would say and what family members would say at different stages of the process. And then it's talking about what would need to be put into the new system to deliver on that experience. So things like, how do you find out about the disability support system? How do you find out where to go, where to get information?
Yeah.
Sitting out a tiny.
They don't need to be close. Yeah, this close.
Okay. You have to speak really close, Barbara.
Lay down back here.
I commend you what you're doing. I think it's brilliant. But I would like to say that it really, really concerns me. We know that in New Zealand we have 70,000 people on the autism spectrum. And guess what? Where are the adults? They're there, but you don't hear from any of them. And why? Because we're all isolated. And when you isolate people, they don't get services. And guess who's doing it? The families. You guys know what I'm talking about. We're starting to come together. There's small groups all over the country that are starting to come together. And we're starting to look at models because unfortunately these structures are all very, excuse the term, neurotypical, but they're not autistic friendly.
Yeah.
And so these guys are not being represented very well at all. And then to hear you say that you haven't got any autistic people, I've got a whole range of people in Hamilton that are screaming out to be listened to. But who do they talk to? And how do we get hold of you? I'm not complaining, I'm asking you.
Absolutely. So this is something that I did identify quite early on and started talking to a range of people in the autism community.
They don't know, they've never been asked. None of them have, because when you go to that autistic community, you go to the, I hate the word lower functioning, excuse me people, I really hate that. But the majority of people on the spectrum are actually higher functioning, but they have the trouble that they don't qualify for any services, and we all have crises times in our lives, we all do, where we all need somebody. But they end up isolated and life goes on, and then they had a crisis and there's nowhere for them to go, and they end up on the streets. Hello, we have a homeless problem. Funny that, eh? But you can see where it comes from, and it's a real problem for a lot of our guys, and they're trying to tell you, but it's not an autistic friendly way that they can reach out and tell you, because they're being asked to. Yeah, it's not friendly for them. So how can we talk to you?
So that would be really useful to get a sense of what you think would work, because that is one of the things I have been trying to talk to some people about, what that might look like in the next stage to make it autism friendly. And genuinely, I really would appreciate any advice you want to give on that.
Yeah, so if I can get contacts from you before.
Absolutely. Up here, but yes, totally and utterly.
Could you pass this down here? I just got a question to ask. So are you saying there's kind of like within the autism community, there's kind of like a strata? Yep, okay.
Most of the, I would have to volunteer because there's no money for adults, working with adults who have high functioning autism. There's no money there at all. And they don't qualify for services because they're intelligent people, they look, they're alive, socially and communicatively, which means that talking to you is difficult, because it's part of the disability, they just fall over. And so they end up opting out completely.
Right.
And they are real concerns.
Just one last thing on that. So I absolutely agree, and one of the pieces of feedback I did get about in terms of was actually going through trusted people to get to the autism community, and so I have been working with some people about what that might look like in the next stage, but genuinely would really appreciate any feedback on who and how.
I was just going to add to say thank you for your feedback, but also we have the ASD work program currently within DSS, and I can be very sure that the issues coming from the autistic community will be represented. So we have a lot of contact both through Altogether Autism and Autism New Zealand, but also how we engage with community and how we get this right. So it will not be forgotten. And you know, we've just released the 2016 ASD guidelines, and we're really committed to that process continuing.
I'd like to take it right back to when we as parents realise our children have issues, and they have an assessment. Why is the assessment either taken as they have a disability or they don't, based on their IQ?
It's not quite like that, but it's a good point. So what the current arrangements are really around, a child won't have an assessment for an intellectual disability until they're 7 or 8, but they may have identified there may be developmental delays. So, you know, the process for accessing services would be an interim type of eligibility.
Well,
but it sounds... Yeah.
We couldn't even qualify for an assessment through health services. We had to pay for it for our daughter, and her IQ showed she was above the range, not hugely, but she was above, so zap, that was it.
Right, yeah.
Everywhere we went, didn't matter where, it was no, you don't qualify, no, you don't qualify.
Okay, so Sacha might be better at answering this than I, but in terms of first point of contact and things like your experience with child development services, or even before that, when your children are born, that's when the system transformation would start. So that you have a good, the intention is that you have a good experience, you get the information you need, and that you don't kind of get these cliffs or the all or nothing. I don't know if you want to add to that. Yeah.
Again, that's one thing we have had consistent feedback about is particularly the what I called the D word for a while, diagnosis, and actually looking at about that it should be about what support is needed rather than being about what the diagnosis was. So that is definitely one thing that we've had feedback about consistently.
Well, with the group of people I'm with who is FASD, a huge majority of them have that experience. IQ, you're dead in the water. And now they're adults, or young adults, and it's just, the kids won't go back.
Yeah, thanks for that. Again, there is another group that we've had a lot of feedback about, and certainly one that we're thinking about how we can provide a better experience for.
I hadn't realised that's what you were talking about. So I don't know if you know that the Ministry of Health has got a FASD action plan. Yeah, I think so, right. Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay.
I just wanted to also raise the point which is slightly beyond outside the square, but so future predictions of special needs and disability. So when I've been reading about future scenarios, including greater technology, etc., the other area that I've noticed is there will probably be the growth of an underclass, which, sorry to bring out something that's beyond the square, but I suspect there's this correlation with preventable disability. The preventable disability that I'm talking about, which worries me, is fetal alcohol syndrome and probably fetal methamphetamine, fetal drug syndrome. Is there, I sort of feel this is going to be involving more and more of society as things change. And so I think it's actually going to touch a lot of government departments, a lot of areas of New Zealand society, and what is being done to probe these areas which seem to leach out and be very hard to find, but the abuse of methamphetamine, the abuse of alcohol, the certain trends in society where these things are happening, and we're getting a burgeoning amount of preventable disability, which I think is very worrying.
I think that is genuinely a very, very big issue. It's not something that I can probably speak to, but it's certainly something we can take back.
Hi, yeah, it's my turn. I just have a couple of things I wanted to share with you, that there's no institutional memory around all of these issues. These issues that are coming through now about us as ageing carers is generational, and the same issues are coming up as did for our parents and their parents. It's just that nobody up there, or whoever makes the rules, remembers the wheels that we have already turned. And who will address that, basically? That's not really a question, it's just a statement.
I think, though, it is a very important statement. One of the things I think about this particular system transformation process is getting people to believe in it, knowing that we've actually been through some of these issues before. It is something that I am conscious of, and I have had a lot of people who have given me many documents to show me things that we've done in the past, so that we can actually understand and make sure that we do not make the same mistake in terms of implementing it properly.
Okay, and that sort of brings me to my next concern, is that you're basing your recommendations on this presentation to government on 9 people's experience, was it?
So there were 13 people involved in the co-design, but it was also based on a lot of research and information that has come from the information that was come through the 2 Enabling Good Lives demonstrations in Christchurch and the Waikato, but also on research summary and analysis, not just from New Zealand, but also from overseas. And that process included going out to the disability sector about a year ago and asking for any evidence about innovations in New Zealand. So we did have a lot of previous analysis and research and evidence that went in as background materials into this process.
Okay, my last point is that maybe if we made the benefit for people with disabilities a living wage and the carer benefit eligibility more accessible, we might not have the same levels of stress as we do now.
Thank you for that.
I'd just like to ask the question. I came back to Auckland from Europe last year trying to find a rental property. There were 5 people in front of me, 5 behind me. I went to numerous places to try and find a rental property. I'm a professional, I have got a good job, teacher, and I found it difficult to find a rental property. How on earth are our children with special needs going to be a priority for private landlords who can pick and choose? And why are the government paying private landlords, enhancing their wealth, when they should be buying stock in Auckland? The government should be buying houses for our children, which are actually safe, long term. They're not going to be taken out when the landlord decides he's going to make a fortune, which has been paid by the government, paying the rent on behalf of our children, when it's such a short-sighted thing. If you look at the big picture, get in there, buy housing stock in Auckland. Apparently there's some kind of a lull for the next month or so. So it just seems really short-sighted that private landlords are benefiting from our kids. And it's really, I'm scared that if I ever find a flat for my son, if a private landlord actually wants 4 special needs people in his house when he's got a raft of people to choose from in Auckland, which I think is highly unlikely. So the kind of people that, the kind of properties who are going to rent out to our kids are going to be in kind of underprivileged areas, areas where our kids are going to be even more vulnerable because they're walking through streets that are not particularly safe. And why is the government just being so short-sighted? Just buy some more properties. Then you actually own the stock rather than a private landlord benefiting from this. And then you can check that it's not damp, that our kids are not living in substandard housing. You can check ventilation, you can check insulation. You own it, and you're going to benefit from it as a government, because at one point, it's, if you want to sell it, or hopefully you won't, but you'll always have stock, because like the lady said, disability is not going away. These kids are going to need to live somewhere, and why should private landlords benefit from it?
Thank you very much for that. That is, obviously housing is a really big concern for people here, and that is certainly something that I'll take back.
And can I just add to that, in that when you're employing staff in a rental property, you are responsible for the health and safety of that staff member or members. And so you need a landlord that will fix things so that the property is safe, not only for the young person, but for any staff members that you might be employing. And so I think that is another kind of deeper consideration. So I've got Janine and I've got Neil down the back.
Okay, I can understand where you're coming from. Okay, my son is 29 and he does live at home. I have 5 kids and he is the oldest. My other kids are saying, Mum, we can't look after him because we have a job, okay? All the day programs, they finish at 3 o'clock. They start at 8:30, so you can't drop them off before, you can't pick them up late. You have to be able to go to medical appointments at a drop of a hat, which is convenient for the government. Then you've got surgeries every year. So you have to have somebody that's prepared to stop their life, basically, without a job, because you've got to, no guarantee, when they get sick, they're going to be sick for not a couple of days, they'll be sick for a couple of weeks. You haven't got enough annual leave, you haven't got enough sick leave. So somebody has to be prepared to give up their life to actually look after your child, okay? Now, if you decide that they're going to catch taxis, what if they can't handle money? They can't handle money. If they've got a note, they've got a note. It could be $20, or it could be $100, or it could be $10. The taxi drivers rip them off, or they take them on other routes. Who's going to stand up for them? And the other thing is, the government has made policies which makes it very hard for the families to even be supported. We can't take our child overseas without paying somebody that's not in the family to go with him or not from the same address. So just for an example, we're going to go away for the first time ever, and we could not find anybody that was available that had a car that could actually be able to take him to and from his programs. He has mental disability, intellectually disabled, to actually attend the appointments and actually be able to be home when he's not at his daycare programs. So then you've got to call on your elderly parents who are in their 80s, which are struggling to cope by themselves because no one else is available. You can't pay family members that are in the same home to take time off to look after them. There's so many loopholes that it even makes it hard for the parents or the family to continue to look after that child. And then when they go to a day program, it's just a babysitting service, and they are lumped with 18-year-olds to 70-year-olds in the same group. Anywhere else in society? No. Does it happen anywhere else? No. Can they even get paid in the
people that they get aren't even trained to do it. It's just that they can't find any other job, so they're there. Today, my son went to a daycare, to a program. He spent the whole afternoon just driving around because they can't have volunteers, because if someone's sick, they have to have a trained person. If that trained person is not available, they just take them on a tiki tour. They just drive around all afternoon. Where else would that be illegal? Where else in society? Here you have the only people that are allowed to be driving with restricted drivers are disabled people in gold cars. Why is that for the government? Don't they put any value on our children? You know, there's so many issues that you're not covering, which are ground root issues. It's not the big, but it's what we are coping with on a daily basis. You know, we can't get IQ tests done for our children when they're older because the government, when they have an accident, ACC say, oh, well, that's how they are, because there's no benchmark being given. You try and get an IQ test done for your disabled person. And you said about having an IQ, if they're over so much, they don't get help. Well, if they're under, they can't even get counselling because they have to have a special person to do it. There are so many things that the government has set up in place to make it harder for the parents that are actually trying to cope. I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I appreciate how challenging it is. What we're trying to do with system transformation, I really hope that we will do, is to provide choices and opportunities and more flexibility and take away some of the rules and restrictions that are there at the moment. So the things you're talking about are really important for us to hear, to make sure that we are putting things in place that enable you to address those issues.
Sacha, I admire what you're trying to do. I think it's very difficult and it's going to take a lot of time and patience. But I've been to a lot of meetings over the last 30 years, and I think I'm going to walk out of here tonight equally as disillusioned as I had at every other one. I understand that the high-level document that's going to Cabinet's come from 13 people. We don't know who they are. The second thing is you're then going to roll out a pilot in Palmerston North. And how long is that pilot going to last?
Okay, I'll talk to that a little bit. There's one bit...
No, my question is, you've heard Colleen talk about diversity of cultures in Auckland. When are we going to get something in Auckland? Because if it's 5 years' time, we'll be having this conversation in 5 years.
Yeah.
And we're going to be 5 years older.
Okay, thank you for that. I can't answer when it will be in Auckland at this point, so I'm just saying that up front. In terms of, there's one bit I didn't, when we talked about the 13 people, so the bit is, it's not just the 13 people around the table, they're bringing their networks and information from their networks, so I do just want to emphasise that. In terms of, it won't be a pilot in Palmerston North. What we're doing is a staged rollout in Palmerston North. So the idea is it will be rolled out across the whole of the mid-central region. It won't be a pilot for a small number of people. And then we will be rolling it out after that to other places. At this stage, we haven't worked out what the sequencing will be, but as you've said, it will take time to do that. So I can't tell you when it will be in Auckland at this point. We will also...
What does it look like? What is it? What are you rolling out?
So when we have the high-level design through Cabinet, we will be able to tell you about exactly what the high-level design looks like, and we will be working through on the detailed design of what will be rolled out in mid-central.
So what you're saying is it's going to government or it's going to Cabinet, but nothing's going. You haven't actually answered a question as to what's actually going. It seems as if you're going there to have a discussion. Like this gentleman said before, you know, this has been going on for years. Surely nobody is that silly that they didn't know 5 years ago that this was happening. What are you rolling out?
So what we've done over the last 3 months is to go through a co-design process to develop what the high-level design would look like, and then always with the intention of rolling it out to mid-central. So we've tried things in Christchurch and Waikato, and we've learnt what did work and what didn't work. And both of those were different to what we're looking at now for two reasons. One, that they were both done outside of the existing system, and we want to transform the system, not add another layer onto it. And two, neither of them built in an explicit social investment approach, which is looking at are there ways that you can invest early or at different stages to get better outcomes for people and potentially reduce costs down the track. So that is what we have been doing over the last 3 months, is working on what that design would look like. And there does need to be a lot more detailed, fleshed out, and that's what we want to come back and talk to people in that process to make sure that we have things that will work in practice for people.
So, hang on a moment, Sacha, you might need to just go back a step and talk a little bit about enabling good lives, because I think people, but you're possibly this far, I think people are back here, they just don't quite understand what is this high level thing that you're talking about, and you can't, if something goes to Cabinet, you can't actually talk about what that is until they've signed it off. So Sacha can't actually be too much more forthcoming, but what she can talk a bit about is enabling good lives, which has been in the Waikato and in...
So enabling good lives, and sorry, I will go back to stuff that some people know lots about, so apologies for that right now. In 2011, some of the issues that you're talking about, and specifically one person here was talking about, which was about the challenges around day services, a group of stakeholders went to Minister Turia and said, hey, day services aren't working for us. And she said, look, that's good to tell me about the problems, but I'd really like to hear about what are the solutions. They went away and came back with a report that was called Enabling Good Lives. And it set out a vision and principles around what a new disability support system could look like. So what they said at that point was that actually it's not about what my family member does 9 to 3, Monday to Friday. It's what they do with their whole lives. So 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And the basic premise behind that was increased choice and control. There were specific things in it which were around, we need someone to walk alongside us, what has been called either an independent facilitator, a navigator, a connector, which is someone who can help us to think about possibilities, what life could look like, and to support us to think about that. It also talked about combining funding. So at the moment, people go and have to do assessments in multiple places across government and get different pockets of funding. What they wanted was for the funding to be brought into an individual personal budget for a person. And the other major thing was around basically taking away a lot of the rules around it, trust us, give us the opportunity to manage the money. So that was what came through. Cabinet looked at the vision and principles and said, yes, this is something that we think looks good, let's try it. And so there was a demonstration in Christchurch that started at the end of 2013, which was with very high needs school leavers. And it brought together funding from the Ministry of Health, the DSS funding, and money from the Ministry of Social Development in terms of vocational services funding into individual allocations, and they had what were called navigators in Christchurch. And so that demonstration went on for 3 years, and in 2015 we started something in Waikato. In Waikato, they have worked with 4 different groups of people. So the first group are people who are in residential care or who are at risk of going into residential care without other options, families with young children, Māori, and the 4th group with people who, with just a little bit more support, could get into employment. In the Waikato model, it was in terms of the demonstration, so both these demonstrations were small, 250 people in each, and in Waikato, they had what were called tūhono, or connectors, who worked with them, and they had options in terms of direct funding where they could actually have money in their bank accounts and use it flexibly. So those are the 2 demonstrations that have been in place and that we have looked at. In terms of in Christchurch, we did it really fast and we learnt a lot about, actually we didn't take people along with us, particularly in terms of providers and schools, and we didn't have everything in place on the first day. in Waikato, there's been a lot more positive feedback in terms of how it's worked, and there are some really good stories about what's been working for people. In particular, some of the things are some of those more culturally responsive options, and also finding for rural communities that there have been actually different ways of using the money to do things differently.
So that's a broad overview. Jan will come to you in a minute. I think what we're concerned with here is that by the time it gets to Auckland, just picking up on Neil's point, it will be, and you don't have any control over this, let's be fair to Sacha about this, you don't have any control. You can make recommendations, but we've got a lot of people sitting here in the room who are right on the cusp, who actually need this now. And actually they needed it a year ago, 2 years ago, in our case probably 7 years ago. And I think that's really where you're coming from, Neil. And I think a lot of us here are saying, how do we get the message through to government that we understand the process of what they're doing? However, we've got 1.5 million people in Auckland, and we have a high, you can just see tonight, and I think Jan's got a whole list of people who would love to have been here but can't. I think a lot of people here are feeling quite desperate that we've sort of been left behind. And we'll probably be the most challenging of areas, particularly with some of the cultural issues that have been raised tonight, some of the isolation issues that have been raised tonight, some of the lack of information because we're not connected. Smaller communities can sometimes find these things out in quite a different way from how we are. And I think those are the kinds of issues that really is the go forward from here and how we manage that. Jan, do you want to say something about, because I think we do have to move to, where to from here, folk? You're the tip of the iceberg, we know that. I think every one of you sitting here tonight can think of 2, 3, 4 other families, 10, who live in the Auckland region who should have been here tonight. So we can all think of that. We can all know the people who have got dependent young adults sitting at home doing nothing. And we all know that we need something done in the next 2 or 3 years, because some of the things that we thought might happen for our young people are not. Some of us don't have any family living in New Zealand. They've all gone overseas to live. And some people don't have any extended family. We're it. And so we're feeling quite vulnerable, I think, and a little bit alone and a little bit left out. It's like somebody else is having a party somewhere and they didn't invite us. So I'm just going to hand over to Jan, but I think, can you guys just think about that a wee bit, because we do need the steps where to from here.
Okay, I'll just be brief, I won't go on. But I think one of the things, the issues for a lot of our families is around trying to get the providers to actually understand the Enabling Good Lives principles. Yeah. Because for a lot of us, you know, we're all absolutely committed to these, and we're committed to them for our young people as well. But it's very, very difficult from personal and professional experience to find providers that are actually prepared to walk the talk, and not just the rhetoric is everywhere. You know, all the mission statements allude to the fact that that's what they're doing, but in fact, in reality, that's not what they're doing. And again, around, you know, families of those of us who've got non-verbal children are often denigrated for lobbying for them and advocating for them, and it's you know, supported decision making is really important to us all, and yet trying to get, again, providers and in some cases NASCs to actually take on board that we really want them to practice supported decision making, and it's not happening.
So, I know there's a few other questions here, but where to from here?
So where to from here? One, I've got the message loud and clear that Auckland wants it sooner rather than later. But probably the most important thing is how can we continue having the conversation and get the feedback from you, and what is it that will work in the best way for you.
Just 1 minute. So, I'm doing an answer to
So genuinely, I think we are going to be setting up social media. We will be sending out communications, but if there is something that you want to do as a group, it would be useful to hear from you what would work for you.
In the meantime, people are taking a couple of years. As she said, the daycare services, when we leave our child there, from the age of 21, 22 to the age of 17. And as she already said, sometimes the child has been taken out just for random, for no reason, or child is just sitting there. I personally have seen when I left my child there, and I was thinking, I can keep my child at home instead of just putting here as a baby care, sitting there doing nothing. So in that 2 years, 3 years time, till people are sorting out, we should have some daycare services where we can send our child adult there and do something interesting instead of sitting at home and doing nothing. It's really very painful as a parent to see that adult is sitting at home and absolutely.
You've raised one. I will definitely take that feedback back in terms of to the Ministry of Social Development around that. But the second thing is another point is this is going to take time to roll out, and we need to actually look at what we can roll out nationally alongside what we're doing in terms of a staged rollout. So that is something we will be thinking about as well.
Just as an option, is it? I sense tonight that there's a lot of information people don't have, and there's a lot of things that people are not connected to. And maybe we need to come back. We've got all the stuff out. Maybe we need to come back and have a session of how can we be better connected? How can we find out information in a way that we understand it? We have a number of people sitting here in the audience has English as not their first language. So we're talking in a lot of acronyms here tonight, and there'll be some things that people don't understand. And oftentimes you need something to read and take away and think about. And I think also people need to be better connected amongst ourselves. And so I'm wondering whether or not we could come back in 2 or 3 weeks' time and actually do some of this more grunty stuff, not just talking about IF, but actually talking about some of the key ways that we can keep in touch, some of the ways that you know what is going to go on. How would you like information given to you? What is the best way for you to get it out? And how can you get that then out into the communities and networks that you work amongst? And I think that, and I think maybe, Sacha, we might need you back again, and we might need the Ministry of Health back again, because I think there's a huge gap in people's understanding and knowledge about what's going on.
It'd be good if it was after the 20th of July.
It would be fabulous if it was after the 20th of July. That would be after the school holidays. Amanda, do you want to speak?
Yeah, I was just going to say that it might be worth mentioning some of the other pieces of work that we're doing, so that you don't kind of leave tonight thinking you have to wait in Auckland and that there's nothing here. So there are a few things that are happening in Auckland that some of you will be aware of, and we can provide some information about that. But I just thought it was really important to respond particularly to your point about respite and the way that people can use funding that they've already got and the rules and so on. So we are just about to release a final respite strategy, which is how the ministry can improve respite and align it to system transformation. So we know that respite is really important for people. We've had a dedicated person within the ministry talking with people all over the country and working out what it is that people need. And her name is Deborah Mills. The draft respite strategy is on the Ministry of Health's website. But just in terms of some of the things that we can do right now, what we're looking at is we've got 16,000 people across the country using carer support. And so that's kind of like respite. I don't know if it's carer support rules that you were referring to. And there are 5,000 people approximately who have quite low allocations of support. And we want to basically take away a lot of the rules that we have around how people use that funding. That will all come out through system transformation. But for those 5,000 people across New Zealand, we could do that much sooner. And so there are some things in the strategy that we've listed that we could do that we think, based on what you've told us, will make things easier. So that rule around how you pay, should make it easier, and that is our intention. I don't know if there's anything else to add to that, Murray. Yeah.
It's just coming up to 8 o'clock, I think. I don't have a watch, but I think it's just on 8. And I know people have been at work and rushed right across Auckland to be here. I do want to draw this to a close. I think we have got a way forward. I would really ask absolutely everybody here, if you didn't register through us, we must have your details, because what you've put up tonight is really, really important. Your concerns, though they may be shared by other people, we've got quite a concentration of them here, and I think that's very important. Disability Connect prides itself on actually getting the people to the people that we serve, in a way, connected to the people that are actually making policies. So you've had a number of them here tonight listening very intently to you. Please don't go away from here thinking that it's just a waste of time. There's over 90 people sitting in this room. I think that's a statement in itself, and I want to again congratulate you all for being here tonight. And I want to say thank you as well for sharing some of the things that you've said tonight, because it's quite hard to do this. I also want to thank the people who've come up, especially. I want to thank Sacha. Could you please put your hands together for Sacha? I want to thank the Ministry of Health team, especially Amanda. Thank you, and Murray, who's been here. And I want to thank the Taikura team. Doing a needs assessment, you are never going to come out pleasing everybody. So it's a thankless job in many ways. But I do want to thank them for being here. No doubt some of you have had a chat to them about various aspects of your needs. So I want to thank them, Liz, and your team for being here. If you could just say thank you to them. But importantly, I want to say thank you to our Disability Connect team. They are amazing. We punch above our weight, and Lisa and the team thank you.
Just picking up on Colleen's point, and Colleen and I haven't discussed this, but if it is a group, and hopefully Colleen will have all your details, or Disability Connect will have your details, if you leave this meeting and there are things that you wish that you had said, or things that you want to have happen, I would absolutely offer that if you get that information to Disability Connect, then we will hear about it. So please don't leave thinking that you wish you had said something, or that actually there is something that we could do. We want to hear it, and you don't have to wait till the whole system's transformed to get something in Auckland. And there are things that we can do. We've got some people here, particularly Murray, who's working in that space, who can think about how we do some of the things better. And I just noticed that some people have talked about an enhanced IEF, and that's something that has been available, and we haven't thrown that away. So, we really want to hear from you what we can do better, and we can just keep working at it. So that offer is there. If you want things, if you want us to know stuff.
Murray and Amanda's cards are out here. Sacha, no.
We can put our things up.
Put them up here so you can email them directly. Look, I just want to say as well, I meant to say this right at the very beginning, but on April about the 10th, I did an interview with Catherine Ryan about this very issue. She said, hey, we'd like to talk to you again a little bit later. So I emailed them and they said, hey, I said, we've got this meeting tonight. And I explained a little bit about the interest. So I'm doing an interview with Catherine Ryan tomorrow morning on national radio at 9:05. So it's going to be the key interview, and we're going to be talking about what happened tonight. Now, please, those interviews are listened to by politicians. They're listened to by people in the ministry. It is taken account of. So, again, we're trying to advocate for this matter that we face in as many different ways as we possibly can. So, if you can find the dial of National Radio, what is it, Barry? Do you know? 7:56 a.m. Yeah, the 7:50. It's a wee bit like your time, get up at 7:56 a.m. or be out the door. 7:56 a.m. It's on FM 101.4. 101.4. 101.4. Okay, 101.4 FM. 101.4. Yes. And so Catherine Ryan is a brilliant interviewer and she's very compassionate. So it should be an interesting session tomorrow. But look, thank you all very much for being here. We'll be tidying up. Please help yourself to some food if you've got a long drive home. Cake is good. Thank you very much.